I'm John Lyon, one of the co-owners here, general manager, Wilkins Harley-Davidson. So happy that all of you folks could make it. We are privileged and honored that Ken Condon, author and trainer of Riding on the Zone, was able to come out here. Ken came out here several years ago and put on a class. It was very well received. We posted it on YouTube. We got a ton of reception on YouTube as well. Thousands and thousands of people have seen that video. Having attended the training myself, raise your hand if you've attended Ken's training in person. I know we got a couple of people here, and I did that. And Linda, you did that as well? The training, and I'm not trying to just plug Ken's training, but we've done training, off-road training, on-road training literally all over the country. And Ken Condon's training is bar none. There's just no, in my opinion, there's not a lot of competitors out there that teach to the level that Ken teaches. So I did want to bring that up to you. I'm sure that Ken will speak about that. He does have books, but there's no substitute for going out and attending one of his Riding on the Zone trainings. The class itself, you don't have to have a high level. I'm not a professional rider, and you don't have to be a professional rider to attend these types of training. You go at your own pace. Ken and his team are really good about watching and making sure that you're riding at your own speed and your own level, and they cater to that. And so that ride, and I don't want to take all this thunder, but that class is really set up where you do a little bit of classroom and then a little bit of riding on the range, on the track, and then a little bit of classroom, and back and forth you go, and you're absorbing the material and sort of analyzing. But two real quick funny stories. One of my favorite things about riding in the zone training was, as we ride around this track, Ken you don't even know that he's next to you, but will come up in front of you and he will tap the tail of his motorcycle to tell you, follow me. This is his way of saying, try to stay within the same lane that he's riding his motorcycle. And he's already kind of built up a understanding of how you are as a rider by following you for a moment, right? So you follow him to the best of your ability and try to keep that lane, and you learn a great deal. Gives you the thumbs up, but he's just ever so smooth to just advance to the next rider and do the exact same thing for them, and so on and so on and so on. Then there's lunchtime. Who here in the group has scraped on their Harley-Davidson motorcycle? Raise your hand. Quite a few of us, right? Well, one of my favorite things about this was at lunchtime, we're all sitting there having lunch, and I had not scraped during the training because I was really taking my time on my motorcycle and I wasn't confident and I just hadn't pushed it. I have scraped in the past, and it was sort of a little, I would say maybe a badge of honor to tell your buddies, yeah, I scraped on that corner. So Ken says, he stands up in front of everybody at lunch and says, hey everybody, if you scraped out there, raise your hand. He's got a great big smile on your face, and a bunch of Harley riders, and this is a bunch of different riders, all different brands. A bunch of Harley riders all raise their hand and puff their chest out. I scraped. And Ken said, well, that's great, because you're not impressing me. And then explain that we can go faster, we can go smoother without having to scrape a motorcycle. And that was like a light bulb went off in my head about all the things that he had been teaching us that first half of the day, and leaning, and how you, the things you can do with your motorcycle, really, it makes a tremendous difference. You're going to be a lot safer without having to disconnect your motorcycle, which is what you're doing when you're scraping, disconnecting your motorcycle from the ground. So I would encourage you folks to ask a lot of questions. Ken, in my opinion, I would try to encourage you, try to take him to task with the things that he teaches you and allow him to explain it. Because if you're not in agreement, then maybe he needs to explain a little further to you the concept. But we're really excited to have Ken, and someone that's been doing this his entire life. His daughter is one of the trainers, and she is a real pro as well, and probably Ken probably won't tell you this, but a better rider than Ken himself. So a round of applause here for Ken Condon.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks, John. Thanks for coming out in this crappy weather. I know there's one person who texted me and said it's really icy out on 89, and I don't see him here yet. Hopefully he's going to make it. Yeah, so John really sold it up a lot. I hope he didn't oversell it. But I'm going to talk today about sort of some of the foundations of cornering better. These are the things that I could do a full seminar on each one of these 10 things I'm going to talk about. But there are some I'm going to focus on a little bit more, only because they're the ones that tend to be what are missing, the skills that are lacking with people that really get into trouble on the street. And I'm going to talk to you as street riders. The training that John was talking about is the track riding, the non-sport bike track days we call them. But I also do street training as well. And these guys been with us. I can't. I think you oversell it a little bit. That's okay, but I'm got a lot out of it. These guys just did Route 66 this summer, and I guess it really carried into. So I mean, the thing is that training is something that should make your riding more enjoyable, because you can think about it as safety. But if I called this a safety course, you know, most people, they'd run away. We don't ride motorcycles to be safe. That's not what we do. So, but we don't want to also cause damage to our bikes and our bodies, and we want to make it home at the end of the day. So safety comes into it. But the point is that if you know what you're doing, things just get so much better and so much more fun. Now, I just came back from a cross-country trip with my wife, and we were in a camper and a truck, but we had a bike with us, and we were in the Black Hills. And there were some pretty interesting corners. And I even said it on the video. I said, I'm so glad I know what I'm doing. Because if I didn't, this would not be fun. This is struggling. If you ever ride in the Alps, anybody ridden in Europe? Yeah, that keeps you on your toes, doesn't it? That if you don't know this stuff, you end up, at the end of the day, stressed. And it's just, why would you want to do that when all it takes is just some knowledge? Now, riding a motorcycle is not, it's not playing chess. It really requires that you take some initiative beyond, just learning how to operate the bike. We learn how to operate the bike the first day that we've ridden, whether it's on the MSF range or whether you just kind of bounced off a bunch of rocks when you were a kid on a dirt bike. That's operating a motorcycle. That's not riding a motorcycle. So when you ride, it's you and the bike, and you know what you're doing. You're doing things purposefully. Purposefully means that you actually are thinking about where you are, what you're doing, what your bike is doing, what your tires are doing. It's another level of riding. It brings you into you can get cosmic about it, but a mindfulness. So when you're on your bike, you're really understanding what's going on. So that's a huge part of riding well. And it's not a foreign language, but it can be, if you're deaf to it, it can be hard to hear. And so just by understanding some of the things that I'll be talking about, that's the first step. Now, I do have books. I got them for sale, later. I've got a couple of them too. Got these two books. This is my first one, Riding in the Zone. That's the website, ridinginthezone.com. And then Motorcycling the Right Way. So there's a couple books that I recommend you get. You can get this one online as a PDF. This is a Kindle version if you need it. But I always say reading does not make you a better rider. Reading gets you sort of, aware. But it doesn't make you a better rider. Application makes you a better rider. Okay, but it starts with knowledge. All right. So what I'm hoping to do for you today is give you the crib notes about how to ride a motorcycle well, specifically riding in corners. Now, why corners? Why am I going to focus on cornering? Anybody?
That's where we tend to get hurt.
That's right. That's the hardest part. Going down the highway, pointing the thing, you could jump off the bike and the bike will keep going straight. It doesn't need you when you go straight. That's just speed control. Once the curve comes, now you got some issues. So most of the... I like doing this first. This is what I've done. I showed you the books. I used to write for Motorcyclist and Motorcycle Consumer News. There's my wife and daughter and myself up at the Blue Ridge Parkway, training on the track with the regular track day people. I did some press launches. That was Portugal. And then I was an MSF instructor for a long time. Why aren't you working, you son of a... So this is why we are going to focus on cornering. Okay? This is all about getting yourself not in this situation. So this is a statistic from 2019, but 53% of the deaths involve only the rider. So there's a lot of focus on those darn cars that pull out in front of us. Now that's real, but this is what we can do to make sure that we are not part of this. Almost more than half of the riders that are killed they just couldn't manage the corner. Okay, so we could do a whole other seminar about managing other drivers and traffic and that sort of thing, but we're going to focus on this because it's so important. First off, let's talk about respecting the limits. So what factors might have led this guy to end up with his bike on its side like this? What's that? Speed's the first one, right? If you go through a corner at 20 miles an hour, anybody can make it through there. So this person clearly didn't get their speed corrected for their ability, for their comfort, for their motorcycle, and maybe for the conditions. It could be that there's sand here that we don't see. Okay? So it doesn't matter really what the cause is in that way. If speed had been brought down, then that would likely have been managed better. That isn't to say go slow. That's not what I'm saying. It's talking about managing your speed, getting the speed to a point where you can manage it. You on that motorcycle, on that road, on that day. Okay? This is just this last summer I was in California, and this is my niece. And she's a pretty new rider, but she was doing really well. But I want to show you this. Yeah. How many of you have done that? I have. How many? Come on, let's see the hands. So you've all done it. Why do you end up in that situation? What causes that? What do you think in this scene here? What was the issue with her? Okay. Specifically, what sort of things? Okay, setting up a little bit too far. Different. She's actually doing okay here. Setting up wide is a good thing. Okay, looking, that's a big part of this. Now, looking doesn't steer a motorcycle. Your handlebars do, your arms. But looking is what's going to be the first step in that. So if you could hear me, I think I turned the volume off on this. I say, look, 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 because I'm talking to her. And she's not able to make it happen. Yeah. So we're going to go through the top 10 things here. And we did talk already about sort of the slow. But as a general rule, enter a turn slower than you exit. Now, to do that and to exit safely, you have to slow down. Now, with people in the street training, it doesn't matter, track or street, but with street training, oftentimes we can just roll off the throttle. We don't need our brakes. We have enough engine braking that we can roll off and adjust our speed and then get back on the gas. That's fine, no problem. What you don't want to do is decelerate through the corner. Enter slower than you exit. You should do this in your car too. Rolling on the gas through the turn stabilizes any chassis. 2 wheels, 4 wheels, doesn't matter. If you're going to a corner and you're trailing is off, trailing the throttle, trailing the brakes. If you're trailing through the corner, the bike is not stable. It's not going to be as stable as it would be if you start to pick up the throttle somewhere in the middle of the turn. I'm going to talk more specifically about that, but what we're going to talk about here is that you have to come into the corner at a speed that allows you to execute the corner ideally, which is to be off the brakes or off your deceleration and on the throttle about a quarter of the way in, maybe a third, up to maybe a halfway into the corner, but not any later than that. If you end up finding yourself trailing or on the brakes too long, then you didn't approach the corner at a slow enough speed. So we're going to talk about trail braking and throttle management and all that. The point of this is to enter the corner slower than you need to so that you can guarantee that you can exit out on drive. You want to drive out of a corner. You don't want to be coasting and pitter-pattering and tiptoeing through a corner. You want to be driving through it. To do that, you have to slow down for it. So back to what I was talking about with street students, oftentimes they will, go through a bend and a curve, and I say, I'm rolling off the throttle right now. Do I have to? No, we're doing 50 miles an hour in a 50 mile an hour zone. I'm not slowing because I have to for speed, but I want to drive out of the corner. So as I approach the turn, I'm just going to feather off. I don't want to slow down. If I'm doing 50 in a 50 mile an hour zone, I'm just going to lose 40 down to 2 miles an hour, 48 miles an hour. And then as I lean in, I go back to 50 miles an hour. So I'm driving, even if it's 2 miles an hour. That is, you're going to feel the difference in your bike. Now, 2 miles an hour is going to be pretty subtle, but when you really understand that slowing and driving is how the bike wants to work, it's how it works, that stability is going to really reward you. If you charge into a corner, you won't be able to get on the gas. You're going in faster than you feel comfortable. You're not going to be able to, for survival, you're not going to feel like you can get on the gas at the point where the bike wants to be on the gas. All right? Now, what is the ideal entry speed? It's really essentially, it's the speed that allows you to drive through the corner and out of the corner. What is your personal entry speed? I don't know. That's personal. I mean, don't try to follow me into a corner if we're on a hot lap, that wouldn't be advisable. But especially if I know the track or I know the road and all that stuff. So when you're riding with somebody else, don't measure yourself against that person. I mean, you can. It's like, wow, that guy knows what he's doing, or girl, because we've got Ronnie here. She'll be able to show you a lot of stuff on the road. You're gonna look at them and go, well, that person really understands. They know what's going on. They got a plan. That is a way to really pay attention to somebody else, but not their speed and not their pace. Okay, because everybody in this room is going to have a different pace. They might be fairly close, but you've got to understand that entry speed is number one. It's the critical thing that you need to manage to make sure that you get through that corner properly. Okay, number two, use your brakes. Now, that I said deceleration is fine for to get yourself to slow for a corner, but if you never use your brakes, you're never going to become a master of brakes. It's like anything else. If you never ski, how do you expect yourself to be a good skier? You have to be able to use your brakes. So you find opportunities to use your brakes and use the techniques that apply to whatever your situation is. So when it comes to using the brakes, well, I'm going to talk a lot about trail braking in a second, but understand that the brakes are not a light switch. So oftentimes when people don't use their brakes a lot, particularly with bikes, with big displacement bikes with a lot of engine braking, a lot of people say, I've never used my brakes. Well, that's unfortunate because I can guarantee you're not a very proficient person, braker. So that would be something you would want to correct. How can you do it? Don't rely on your engine braking so much. When I take people out, I have them ride in a higher gear. One that won't allow you all that engine braking from third gear. I want you in fourth gear. So that it forces you to use your brakes. That's one way to do it. Another one is to find, when you're in roads that you can read, that you understand roads and corners that really require trail braking or braking into the turn. That's where you want to pay attention to that and make sure you use it. Don't downshift one more and just use your engine braking. The other thing is don't use just one brake or the other. That's another thing we'll chat about in a second. So what type of corner can you share with us? There are several, but give me a type of corner that would require you to use your brakes. Decreasing radius. Okay, you're approaching it. How do you know it's a decreasing radius turn? By looking, you may be able to see it, you may not, right? A lot of corners are blind, you can't see them. That's another part of it, is reading the road, and we work on that with the street training a lot. But if you aren't sure whether that corner is going to continue to hook around, you have to approach slower. Can you do that with engine braking? Yes, you can. So in that way, decreasing radius requires you to slow down for sure, but that engine braking alone would be, you could probably get away with it. All right, now let's bring back to the Alps. Let's say we're in Europe. what corners did you feel like you just had to brake, you needed to brake? Hairpins. Particularly downhill hairpins. Okay? You've got gravity you have to manage. Engine braking, you're going to be like, ah, you know, it'd be crazy. You couldn't do that. You need to brake. So when you find roads that are like that, you can call those training roads. I have training roads that I bring my students on, and they force this sort of learning the technique of trail braking, which again, I'll mention the details about it in a second, but that it forces you to brake. Front brake, rear brake, both brakes? Yes. It depends on your situation. Now, I could do a whole seminar on this, so I'll hit on a few things. I have videos on my YouTube channel that talk exactly about this. I have articles on my website, ridinginthezone.com, that talk specifically about what brake to use when. All right? And that'll be something that I would hope that you will follow up on and look at. And those are all free, no problem. Just read away, enjoy them, share them. When it comes to using your brakes, though, you have to understand they're not a light switch. Oftentimes people who don't use their brakes, they end up over braking. Now, particularly when it comes to trail braking, that you're used to braking in a certain way. You have a muscle memory about the intensity and the timing of when you use your brakes and how hard you use your brakes. And that has to be trained out of you. Most people think of their brakes as 0% and about 30% maybe, and maybe 70 and then 100. They really only have very crude steps in their braking. You have to learn to really be, when it comes to managing traction and speed control, so that you're not over slowing or you're not slowing quite enough, is you have to have a feel for your brakes. So brake feel is important, it's really critical. How do you learn that? Well, there's a lot of ways. First off, we talked about forcing yourself to use your brakes. That's going to help a lot. You're going to get a feel for how your bike operates, and you're going to have a more refined braking skills. Rear brake is different than front brake. Every bike you ride is going to be different. First thing I do when I ride somebody else's bike is I test the brakes. I want to make sure I have a feel for, just how much pressure I have to give on the lever or on the pedal. Okay, and so every time you get on your bike, if you're really familiar with it, it should come right back pretty quickly. But if you've never done that, then that's going to be a problem. So think of your brakes from, even if you go from 0 to 10 to 20, 30, 40, now you've really refined your brake precision from really crude, 0 to 30 to 60 to whatever. Do it from 10%. Get better at it. Eventually, when I'm riding on the track, 0.5%, I have to feel that brake. I can't afford to really go to 1.5%, and I will lose the front. So that's the level that brings you on with the racetrack. Now, I'm going to talk about track day training, but it's really just to bring you to that 10% chunks or increments of your braking. Now, same with your throttle. We'll talk about that too. Let's just talk about trail braking. Does anybody know what that is? Can you describe it? If I've never heard it before, give me part of it anyhow.
Braking into a corner past the initial tip-in.
Okay, that's good. Braking into the corner past the initial turn-in, your initiation. Now, why would you do that? Think about it this way. If the MSF, how many of you have taken MSF class? Yeah. So they would teach you to get off your brakes before turning. Okay, that's because beginners can't really chew gum and walk at the same time. It's better to just separate that out. But that's for beginners. Unfortunately, a lot of experienced riders are doing the same thing. They're getting off the brakes and then turning. There's some problems with that. First off, let's go back to our downhill hairpin. Downhill hairpin. If I got off the brakes while I'm still pointed straight before I've turned in, what's going to happen?
Lose traction in your front tire.
Nope, I got off the brakes, so I'm okay there.
Well, weight distribution.
Okay, your weight distribution will change for sure, but what happens with your motorcycle when it accelerates? Which way does it want to go? The way it's pointed, straight. So if I'm in a corner going downhill, the traction, the weight bias changes for sure, and that's part of this, is that if I get off the brakes, the bike's going to want to keep going straight, and I have to fight it to get it around the corner. So I'm working against the dynamics of the bike. Gravity is an accelerator. So if you don't control gravity with your brakes, you're going to end up struggling to get the bike turned. And you'll panic. You'll get into these downhill hairpins, and you'll hate downhill hairpins, and you'll never want to do them again. So that's an example of where you want to hold on to your brakes. Now you can, again, get your gear down enough that you would engine brake yourself in there. You're going to just rev the piss out of your bike, though. I'm talking about a fairly steep downhill turn. You need to use those brakes. Use them gradually, smoothly, softly, and then as you turn in, you start to roll. You start to release the brakes as you increase your lean angle. So trail braking has nothing to do with what type of surface you're riding on, like trail or road. It's trailing off your brakes. As you increase lean angle, you decrease brake pressure because you have to manage traction. Reason they don't want beginners to brake and corner at the same time is because you're using up traction from braking and from cornering. So you can't, if you do too much of that, you're gonna lose traction. So you have to manage that. So that's why as you increase lean angle, you got to give up brakes. But that's fine. What it ends up being is that as you come into the corner, you hold the brakes, you initiate your countersteer, which we'll talk about, you initiate your lean, and just as soon as you get into that lean, you can start to release. Some corners, like a downhill hairpin that hooks around on itself, I will be on the brakes definitely at 50% around that corner. Almost sometimes I will be hanging onto the rear brake past that halfway around. Because again, the bike, if the corner's turning like this, at what point is my bike pointed where I feel like I can let gravity accelerate it? It's pretty much around the corner. If I get off too much here, I'm pointed off the road when the road goes this way. So I hold that brake, it helps to hook the bike around. Now the dynamics that you brought up is that when you're either decelerating hard or braking is that you're loading the front tire. That helps the bike turn. It pivots on the front tire. Even a little bit helps. So that's two reasons. One is to control your speed, control your direction of travel, and to help the bike turn. If you brake hard, that doesn't work. Hard braking and trying to turn against a hard braking, that's hard. That's difficult. That isn't what I'm talking about. Trailing off the brakes is going to allow the bike to load, turn, and then release. And as you release and get on the gas, that opens your suspension and allows the bike to accelerate out. And we'll talk a bit about that. So that's a very short description of trail braking. People that I work with who have even done trail braking, they get off the brakes too early. Because oftentimes it's because they're slowing down too much. If you've never done it, you're only braking from your muscle memory, which is very crude. It's 0 or 30%. Well, 30% is too much for some corners. For a downhill hairpin, a steep one, 30% is good, but if you go to your next feeling, which is 60%, that's too much. So people then let go of the brake, but the bike isn't pointed yet. Follow me? So it's all one thing affects the other. So you have to refine your braking. Okay? I have videos about trail braking that I'm talking, so I'm narrating them so you can sort of see in real time what that's like. Okay, we talked a bit about this. Look well ahead. Again, looking does not turn a motorcycle. So if you're in a corner like this and you go, Ken says turn your head, turn your head, turn your head. Well, you can still keep going straight right off the road. So, but I will guarantee you that it'll be a lot easier if you look where you want to go. Think about how hard it would be if you are in a corner that's got your attention, you're pretty nervous about it, and you don't look through the turn. You want to go this way, and you go and you're looking off that way. What are the chances that the bike is going to go that way? Not very good. Now, looking where you go is going to, in some ways, insist that I'm going here. When you get into a corner that's like, you better just, your eyes have to go where you want to go. And this is something you have to train yourself to do, because target fixation is a natural human thing. It's what we have to train ourselves out of. We're born with this. Now, if you look where you are afraid to go, you'll likely go there. It's sort of the general idea. I have one example of when I got into a corner too hot. I was actually on the ice. I ride on the ice with a dirt bike, and I was coming into a corner, and we had to shovel the snow off, so we had a bank, sort of a berm on the outside, and it was gotten kind of icy. You wouldn't want to hit it, put it that way. So I came around the corner, and everything's going good, but I was like, oh, gee, this is not going to go well. So what did I do? I went like this. The bike hooked right around, and I missed the berm. Now, it was just a matter of like when I did this, my arm did this. But it wouldn't have done that if I fixated on that berm. I would have absolutely hit it. So that's something that in the heat of the moment, you have to be able to go, ugh, this is where I want to go. So look there. The chances of you getting through there is actually, well, it's 100% better. Whether you actually do it or not, you know, that comes to how confident you are with your countersteering and that sort of thing. But looking ahead. The other thing about looking ahead is when I talked earlier about reading the road. So we work on this a lot with the street training, is that you see a road that you've never been on. Like, you know, ride in the Alps, you ride out west. I've never ridden on these roads before, but I did not get in. I got into one corner that kind of got me a little bit weirded out, over 2,000 miles of riding. And why is that? It's because I know what to look for. I look, not just look ahead, I look for things that tell me what the road is likely to do. It's a blind turn. I don't know what it's actually going to do until I'm around the corner. But I make an educated guess at it based on what I'm looking at and seeing. Which is, to give you the hint, it's a lot of videos on it, a lot of articles on it. It's looking at how the relationship of the painted lines or the side of the road, how it curves around. Without looking ahead, and most people, particularly beginners, will look just in front of their front wheel. And even experienced riders that I work with, they tend to look only sort of in mid-range. Expert level track riders that I work with, the first thing we look at is their vision. And the farther out you can look, the slower everything feels. It's that idea when you were a kid and you look down at the dash lines, they're like, oh, going by like this. Well, you look up and they come at you slowly. Look down, it's fast, it's all hair on fire. Up here, it's like, oh, I got plenty of time. So get your eyes up. This is somebody who's doing a tighter turn, so that's why he's really exaggerated his head turn. But that's the same thing. This is a really tight turn on a range in a parking lot, but you get that head turned, exaggerate it, and you'll find that bike just flows. It follows where you look. Okay? Assuming you know how to handle the bike, otherwise operate it. Okay? Does anybody have a little story on target fixation they'd like to share? No? Everybody's done it. Yeah.
We went riding up to the Northeast Kingdom this past summer, and I don't know what town we were in, but it was a sharper turn, but I was more focused on the town. And I had one guy behind me. He was the only one that noticed it, but I came precariously close to clipping the curb on that turn, and it was because I think once I finally got in panic mode and realized, like, I took my eyes off the town, looked at, like, oh, gee, it was too late at that point. And I think that it was, it's that target fixation in the sense of, like, I didn't really have a target out of the turn.
Yeah.
And it was the point of panic that I looked down at that point, and I could tell that the braking was almost not going to make it. And indeed, I almost hit the curb.
So why did you not hit the curb?
Well, I think luckily enough I was going slow enough, but that was a dumb mistake.
Yeah. So that's an excellent example. Is as soon as fear kicks in, we're going to look at the hazard, not at the solution. But you have to train yourself to look for the solution, and that's where you want to go, not where you're afraid to go, or where you are going. Okay, you have to make it happen with your eyes. Great. That's really common. It's oftentimes it's something small like that, like a curb, and you're distracted. That's really, really common, but it applies. Same thing. Okay, we'll hit on these again later if we need to. Effective cornering lines. So this goes back to that video of my niece that we talked a little bit about positioning. Look at this photo here. Where would you want to be in this in this corner, would you want to be with the blue bike or the red bike? And why?
Red bike's gonna hit the guardrail.
Because he's pointed. See, it's all about where your bike is pointed. Just like I was talking about when it's okay to get on the gas, it's also where you start the corner is going to affect how you exit it. People don't crash at the beginning of corners. They don't crash in the middle of corners. They crash at the exit of corners. So by setting up wide, you now come across, and he's pointed there, but his bike the trajectory is pointing him down to safety, down the road. This guy here is going to have to hug the yellow line all the way around, which has its own dangers, doesn't it? Leaning into the oncoming lane. So he's set himself up to make it really, really difficult. So to set up wide out near the white line and cut across, you're pointing your bike to safety, not to the guardrail. So your angle of entry and exit is a really critical thing to keep in mind. So here's a little graphic that shows, if you can see the yellow bike and the red bike. Both riders are on the same line here. They go outside toward the inside. And the reason we do the outside, inside, outside path when we can, I get a lot of people saying, well, I don't want to be, out where the sand is. Well, don't. I wouldn't either. It's when it's safe to do so. You set up to the outside and you get a better angle of view into the corner. And then if you cut in and then go out wide like this yellow rider does, it's a bigger radius. See, it's a bigger circle than the red rider. So you're using less ground clearance and less traction. But that's great for a single corner. See, the yellow bike treated this one corner as a single corner, outside, inside, outside. But then he's screwed here. So sequential corners means that you have to, again, vision. You have to get your eyes forward. You have to see this coming. The red rider saw that there was going to be a switchback. So she went out to here, kept it tight, so it was outside, inside, inside, turned into outside for the switchback. And you can see now, set up this, she's gone out here, come in here, all set, all good to go, stays out wide, and then finishes the sequence. The yellow rider, because he went wide here, he's now stuck. He's screwed here. For him to get back online, he'd have to make a pretty dramatic direction change to get back on the red line. It's not going to happen because at the speed you're going, even at 30 miles an hour, it takes a long time to actually get your bike to change direction that much. So you're going to start heading toward the guardrail. Now we're back to target fixation. That is what you're going to look at. Guarantee it. That's where people crash, right there. If for some reason you manage to not hit the guardrail, you're still screwed here unless you really just abort, slow it down, get yourself back online, and regroup. Okay? If you don't, it just gets worse. It just gets worse. So this is an example, a simple example of sequence of corners that you can get yourself, even though you start off great, you can easily get yourself into trouble if you're not already ahead of the game with your vision and the knowledge about where you want your bike to be. So this guy here is a classic example. Now this is back to where my niece was having trouble. And luckily nobody's coming because he is not going to stay in his lane. There's no way. Where would you want to be at this point in the corner? Where would you want to be?
Close to the white line.
You betcha. The apex of this turn, which is the innermost part of the turn, is around the corner. It's over here. I want to have my bike right here. Because if I don't, even if I have it here, I'm still headed that way. I want to be headed right there. Because then it switches back this way, and I want to hug that white line for the left-hand turn that's about to come up. So this guy just messed it all up. He turned in. He actually didn't turn in early enough. He stayed out a little too wide, too long. And you see he's on the brakes. So this braking should have happened way back there. He's now in a panic mode. So he's hitting the panic switch, which is your brakes. The other thing is look at where he's looking. You kind of can't see, but he's looking that way. He's looking where his bike is pointed, not where he wants it to be. Okay. Countersteering. This is how you get your motorcycle to change direction. There's just no real debating it. Can you get your bike to change direction by just using your body? No. You can get it to drift. Absolutely, I can get it. I weigh 150 pounds. If I get on one of these bikes, do you think my little 150 pounds is going to get that bike to turn? I'm talking about turn. No. I could hang off that thing like crazy, and all it's going to do is just sort of drift. So the way you do it, whether you know it or not, you're doing this, is you're using your handlebars to get the bike to turn. You're unbalancing it. You're essentially, I'm riding along, I'm unbalancing it so that it falls. I want it to fall into the lean. And so when we use our handlebars, that's why when you say when you turn, to turn right, you press right, I'm turning that front wheel out from under me. So the center of gravity then causes me to fall over. So if you were on ice, on like glare ice, you were standing in front of me, and I kicked your feet out from under you this way, which way is your body going to go? That way. Center of gravity is somewhere around here. I just took the front contact patch out from under you, you're going to fall the other direction. That's the basic understanding to get you to understand that that is what you're doing. It's better when you understand it, and then the concept, a lot of people say, yeah, I understand it, but I really don't, Make it so that it's something that you just understand and that you know you do and you're conscious of it. So when you're out there, do a little weave and go right, left, and consciously know what you're doing to make it happen. Okay? Countersteer with authority is going to allow you to, when you get into like that tight hairpin and you don't get it quite right, instead of going off the road, you freaking countersteer. You get that thing laying in there. What's your option? What's your other option? Go off the road. But if you don't understand that you can get the bike to lean in and carve that turn, you're likely not to do it. You won't do it. You won't suddenly pull that skill out of your hat. Okay? So this is something that you really want to be conscious of. There is a little drill I do with people that afterwards, if you're interested in it, come on up and see me. Now really, learn to really lean. What do I mean by that? We're all born with a sort of a personal lean angle limit where we feel comfortable. That is we're born somewhere around, it's 14 degrees. That's what we can do is when we run in a circle as fast as we can. It's horses too, it's 14 degrees. That's about it. But we lean a whole lot more than that, don't we? Even the ground clearance on these bikes is still 30, 33 degrees, something like that. So you have to learn to lean beyond what you're born with. Now, that doesn't come too hard if you rode bicycles as a kid, if you skied, if you did any sports. You're going to learn a little bit more about the dynamics that are needed. But on a motorcycle, a lot of people, again, they get on it thinking it's just another vehicle, and they get into trouble. Because when it comes time to lean, like now we're back to our hairpin turn, and you want to countersteer that thing in, you won't do it if you're afraid of leaning. You're going to be afraid the tires are going to slide out. They might, but what's the alternative? So if you are able to feel like, all right, I've leaned this bike before so that I've dragged the floorboards, I've done it before, I know I can do it again, so do it. Now you screwed up. You got in there too fast. But you're in a situation now where you're trying to save yourself. You got to be able to lean the bike. Now this is somebody on the racetrack. This is one of our track day training people. You see, regularly touching his floorboards. John mentioned about the body position seminar that this guy's doing pretty well. You see how he's leaning in? We'll talk about body position in a little bit. Because he's leaning in, his bike doesn't have to lean over as much. Okay, so he's now at the limit of the lean angle, but it's greater than if he wasn't leaning in his body. All right? The floorboard would be starting to fold up instead of just skimming. But this is how you're going to learn to be a safer street rider, is if you've done this at speed. Now, I'm not talking, when I train people on the track for the non-sport bike street riders, it's not to make you a faster street rider. That is the opposite of what I want. But I want you to ride at a pace that you ride now exponentially safer. because you have in your muscle memory, in your repertoire, brakes, throttle timing, and lean angle. You know that it's okay. And countersteering, you know how to get the thing to lean. Okay? This is something everybody has. And we all have different lean angle limits. Yeah?
I find that I'm more comfortable leaning in one direction than the other.
Which direction?
With me, it tends to be I'm more comfortable with the left.
Really common. Very common. For some reason, I think it's because we're in the northern hemisphere, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But it's really common that left-hand turns are easier for people. There are theories about it, that the throttle's on the right hand when you're pressing, that you're trying to control the throttle and you're tentative about pressing the right handle grip. There could be something to that, I don't know. Anybody have any theories they've heard that could be convincing? Yeah, I haven't. So Ronnie likes going to the right. So there you go.
Dominant hand?
Could be, but I'm not so sure. See, most of us are right-handed, but most people struggle with the right-hand turn.
Left-handed and I go to my right.
So maybe it's the other way, right? I had not heard that theory, actually.
I'm just more used to right-hand turns being sharper. I've never dragged floorboard or pegs on left turn. I've done it on right turn.
Yeah.
On almost every bike I've owned.
And why is that?
Somebody else's bike too.
And why is that? Why is right-hand turns tend to be tighter? Because we ride in the right-hand lane.
Right-hand side of the road, yeah.
Yeah, that's the inside. It's a tighter turn. So that's why you're likely to drag parts in right-hand turns, unless the road is cambered well. We're going to talk a bit about that. So this is an important thing, that you can bring your bike to a parking lot and get the beginnings of this and do circles. Don't get too dizzy, but do circles and drag your floorboards. Just do it the other direction. You know.
That feels so funny though.
It feels pretty funny, right?
Like on your foot's going like that.
Yeah. So when you do it first time, I guarantee you're going to go, huh. Right? Same with when people drag their knee for the first time on the racetrack. It's but then you get used to it, and then it's like, oh. But that's where you want to be. You want to be at that high level. Riding a motorcycle and training is like being in the military. You train yourself to like the worst scenario. Oh my God. But then you're usually sitting around smoking cigarettes most of the time. Until you better know what the hell you're doing. Your training's got to kick in. Motorcycling is not different. Traction. Now you're always saying, well, if I lean my motorcycle too much, I'm going to lose traction. Could be. It could be more likely on bikes like these that you're going to lever yourself off the tires. That's where body position comes in, we'll talk about. But when it comes to traction, you have to understand the physics of traction. And that is that there are certain conditions where your tires will grip better than in other conditions. Now, I'm not talking about like sand. That's just something we have to manage. Something like that. Wet steel plates, manhole covers. That's something we just have to manage. So I'm talking about, and how you do that is you just understand that, oh, I don't have much traction here. So you're going to manage it that way. How do you manage let's talk about that. How do you maintain traction over, say, a wet construction plate, steel plate? Slow down when? Before you get to it. Don't slow down on it, because that's one of the things you don't want to do is do anything. You don't want to do anything over it. You want to roll over it, and that's it. Once you're past it, and then you can resume. So you slow before you get to it, don't do anything, and then off you go. If you're in the middle of it and you hit the brakes, which is what a panic situation, I'm sure that's why the 3 people I saw on the side of the road coming up here today, is that they got like this in their car. What did they do? That's our panic mode. And then what happens? There you go. You have to train yourself out of that. Now in a car, that's, you have to take special training for that. But it's the same idea, is that if you're over something like that, don't do anything. Don't accelerate, don't brake, don't decelerate. Certainly don't turn. Okay? But what if you have to? Then you do it really carefully and really softly.
How do you get the sense for the limit? Like, I know with different bikes and roads and tires, there's a limit. Sometimes it's hard to figure out how far you are into your traction extreme. Right?
And that's from...
They don't tend to want to find that out.
No. That's the great thing about being on the racetrack again. You ride your bike on the tires you ride on in the street, and you go out there and you will lean more than you ever have. And
you look at your chicken strip on the tire afterwards.
you may not, but it depends on the tire and the bike. There are bikes.
And that'll tell you how much more tire
Exactly.
you potentially have to come over with.
Exactly, and you'll find that there's a lot more.
Yeah.
Even on the street, I don't use the full edge of the tire.
On these bikes, you're always going to have a chicken strip. 'Cause
Right.
You're going to hit the frame before you get
That's
to the
right.
tire.
So your tires are not the limiting factor. Not on these bikes for sure. But to answer your question, it's from experience. It's riding in the rain and bringing it to a level that you've not brought it to before. But well within a range that you're likely going to be okay. In a place where you're not going to have a lot of variables. I just defined what a racetrack is. Out on the street, you can go out on the road and go down this twisty road and go, oh, I'm going to push this a little bit just to get a feel for what these tires will do in the rain. And suddenly there's sand. All right, now you got an issue. You have to keep that into account. So those variables are going to get in the way of you getting to the ideal knowledge you're looking for about how will these tires handle in the rain on this pavement, because it'll change. Now, how do you know? How do I know? When I'm on the racetrack and I know I'm losing traction, is vagueness, which is why you might have heard a lot about people complain about feedback, especially performance riders and performance bikes, that you want to have good feedback. And basically, the tire is telling me exactly what it's doing, where it's at. But that's a language you have to learn. It's not a magic thing. A light doesn't come on on your console and tell you that you're about to lose traction. That has to happen in here. It happens through your seat, your feet, your hands, and all your whole proprioceptive system. So what you end up doing, though, to get there is find a place like a clean parking lot and go out, do circles, do figure eights, get a feel for it. Understand that you're going to affect the amount of traction that you have. If you're anxious and you're tight on the bars, you will have less traction. Because the bike has to be able to, and the bike and the tires has to be able to do what it needs to do. And that means it needs to be fluid. The suspension needs to do what it needs to do. That front end does this. You don't even know it's doing it. Even when you're going straight, that front end is doing this. If you were to lock your front wheel, lock your forks, and go down the highway, you would fall over. Because even like the whole thing I was talking about on the highway, you could jump off and the bike would keep going. That front tire is doing this to keep it in balance until it goes too slow, and then it'll fall over. If you're tight on the bars, you're not letting that do that. You do that in a corner, and now you've got some real issues. Okay? So you get into a situation, it's like, oh, I think I'm going to, my tires aren't going to hold, and you tighten up. Yeah, okay, there's 20% more likely that they're not going to hold. So you got to understand that, too. Every tire is a little different. This is me on the racetrack on my Tiger. These are 90-10 dual sport tires. I dragged my knee on this bike that day on those tires. But I'll tell you, I was on the same tires at another racetrack when it was cold. Like it started off cold. I got out there one lap and I'm like, oh, gee, I got to get off this. This is dangerous. Because I could feel, there's like nothing going on. I said, wait a second. I know how this goes. Tires warm up. I went another easy lap, and the bike started feeling, now I could feel that it had the grip. I wasn't getting that real vague feeling anymore. After that, I was able to rip 3 laps of just taking it easy, gradually warmed up. It was night and day. Same within the rain is that tires do warm up, they flex. That's how you get some heat in them. You get less when it's in the rain. But if you're out on the track, we ride rain or shine on the racetrack, and a lot of people are anxious about that, but it is one of the best learning opportunities. Hope for rain on your next track day. You'll go out there and you'll find that it's like, yeah, out at first, the first lap is a little sketchy. Take it real easy, be real smooth, and then as you warm them up, boy, you realize how much traction there really is. It's great. Your riding will never be the same after that. So developing that traction sense comes from you putting yourself in a situation where you're incrementally challenging yourself. Incrementally. Don't take a big bite out of it and then you're going to fall down. You have to ease into it. be smart too. You can't expect your tires to grip on certain surfaces, sand, whatever. Even things like I just posted a video on handling bumps, because I was riding with a friend in California on my wife's MT-07 Yamaha, and it's got crappy suspension. It's real basic suspension. And the corners would have these like chop in it, you know? And so how do I manage that so that I'm not gripping the bars and causing the tire to have to work harder? Anybody have a clue as to what things you can do to help the tires manage choppy cornering?
Grip the tank, let the handlebar float.
Okay, let the handlebars be light, grip the tank, weight the foot pegs. So you're supporting yourself, but not with your hands. Let the bike do its thing under you. That's a dirt riding thing too. Is the bike's going to do what it wants. Just don't try to control it. Kind of facilitate a general direction. Okay. The big thing here about understanding how tires grip is about load. So I crashed last spring on cold tires. They were race tires, so they require more heat, because I did two things at the same time, and it unloaded my front tire. Well, I did one thing that unloaded the front tire, and then I gave it a little handlebar input. I'm talking really small, but I was on race tires at a point where I was already leaning probably at this lean angle, and it was 45 degrees outside. So, you know, I'd done that. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I'd never do this, and I happened to fall, and I know exactly what I did. For this one corner, it's a tight corner, that I went in, I slowed down plenty. As I went in, I released the brakes right at the same time that I gave countersteer. So I unloaded the tire by releasing the brakes, and I gave it the countersteer at the exact same time, and I lost the front. What would I have done different? I would have stayed on the brakes and been more gradual about my countersteer. The reason I did it is because I went into that corner just a little too fast. There's a theme, right? It happens to all of us. In that case there, I would have been smarter just to let the bike run a little wider. Because I could have. So load is your friend. So if I were to put my hand on a tabletop and I were to just, see if I can do this without knocking it over, right? No load. I load it. I got grip, good traction, no traction. Somewhere in between is where we live. Okay. So knowing that if I'm going over something that's going to unload my tire, I know like my front tire, like say an uphill hairpin, I don't want to use a lot of front brake because I don't have a lot of load on that front tire. I would favor the rear brake because I have good load on the rear tire. If I have a passenger on the rear, I now have more load on the rear tire. I can use more rear brake. On a sport bike, if I were to brake really hard, that rear tire comes up off the ground even. It has no load. So we don't even use the rear brake on the racetrack typically because the rear tire is barely in contact with the road. I'd be locking the rear brake all the time. So if I were to use it, I use it before it unloads. But I'd have to get off of it before it completely unloads. So you see what I mean? It can get pretty complex, but it's actually really simple. It's about load. Is this tire going to be loaded enough for me to be able to give it the brakes or throttle, whatever, or turning that it needs? Remember, countersteering uses front tire traction. Acceleration uses rear tire traction. Braking uses both tires traction. Okay, number 8, precise throttle and time control and timing. We actually talked about this a little bit with the hairpin situation. When you're in a corner, when you give throttle or let go of the brakes on a downhill, you're telling the bike that you're done turning or about done turning. So time that appropriately. If you get off the brakes and you get on the gas, you better be pointed where you want to be pointed. Give or take. I mean, you don't have to be pointed this way. You can be pointed that way, but the bike is already in its lean on the side of its tires. So when you get on the throttle is really, really important. This is one of the things we work on a lot. If you start running wide in corners, you're getting on the gas too hard or too early. Be more patient. Some corners that are really long corners, really, really long, I mean, oh my God, is this corner ever going to end? You want to get on the gas a little sooner. You get on it, but you get on it like at half a click, you know? If you think of like a ratchet of your throttle with clicks, you go half a click and you hold it. As it starts to come around, you can go to 1 click, 2 clicks. As it straightens up, 3, 4, 5. But you have to be patient. You get in there and you get into 1 click, 1 full click, or 2 clicks. The bike's going to want to go wide, and you're going to be trying to struggle to hold it in. Make sense? This is just understanding how a motorcycle works. But you should be able to feel this too. You've been riding a long time. You just might not know why you ran wide. There are various factors. It could be traction, but oftentimes it's just the timing of the throttle. Now back to where we were talking about entering a turn slower than you exit, that your bike wants to be driven out of a corner. It wants that 60% of its load on the rear tire as you're leaning. So get on the gas as soon as you can, just to get the weight bias. You brought up weight bias. Get that weight bias to happen so that it's 50-50 to 60-40 as you drive out. Then it can be 80-20 if you wanted to drive out really hard.
The longer you have a bike, the more you can play with it.
Yeah.
I've had my VTX since 2014, and it's a heavy bike. I can almost grip that out of a corner if I want to, but electric glide, I don't mess around with that.
And that's a matter of just knowing that's where.
I only rode that for 2 years, and it's a lot heavier.
Yeah. Well, weight, again, every bike is going to be different. It's going to feel different, but the physics is the same. Except one little thing here is that with a really long wheelbase bike, you're going to have more rear brake power available to you because you don't pitch. Like a sport bike's really short wheelbase, it unloads the rear tire pretty quickly on the brakes. A long, stretched out wheelbase bike, it doesn't pitch so much. So your rear brake is a lot more effective. Okay, that throttle steering idea is that when you're on the gas, you're telling the bike, I'm done with this corner. It will drive out, which is good when you think about the outside, inside, outside path to open up the corner. You don't do that with the handlebars. You do that with the throttle. Let the throttle bring the bike up and out. Harder you do it, the quicker it's going to happen. Gradual, gradual. All right, body position. Let's talk about this. I will say right away, this actually could be number 11, that I won't even really talk about it, but people love to talk about it. Because body position is sort of something that a lot of people want to work on, and especially on the racetrack, but it's not a game changer until you're at a high level. Mostly, for street riders, it's going to be this, slow maneuvers. You want to have your body position counterweighting. This is where you should focus. When you're riding on the street, you're typically not going to be riding fast enough to have to do a whole lot of body positioning to keep the floorboards off the road, but you want to have that skill. But this is the thing, like I was talking about, the bike won't have to lean so much if you lean in. See, pretend my bike is here. If I'm leaning in like this, I'm in line with the bike. Right? We're both leaning at the same angle. If I go like this, the bike can stand up slightly because I'm changing the center of gravity, the combined center of gravity of me and the bike. I can't move the center of gravity of the bike, but I can move my center of gravity, my part. And if you get it inside, that bike will gain a degree anyhow, depending on how much. And one of the reasons we do this is to really get the bike so that I'm not dragging my toes. I'm keeping the contact patch more in the center, not on the very edge. It's all the benefits of doing that. It also helps kind of lever the bike into the turn. I'm still countersteering, but when I get into the corner like that and I hang off, the bike, then I'm encouraging it to take that turn, to carve the turn. This is a non-sport bike track day guy. You can see his body position. Not terribly aggressive. All it is just this. So when you're on the track with us and we learn about body position, most street riders will ride like this. Because that's what you do. That's what you've done. You don't do any different. As soon as I tell you to do this, you'll do this. Good, you got the joke. You don't do it because you think you are. And when we show you the photos, it looks like this. You thought you were this. It's because your muscle memory, your body, you think that this is like a big deal because you've always ridden this way, straight up and down. to get to this point takes some conscious effort. You'll get there if you do it for one day, you'll get there in the afternoon, some more than others. But it will feel like you're like ready to fall off the motorcycle if you've never done it before. But body position is a big part of dancing with your motorcycle. Your bike is your dance partner. You're stiff. I don't want to dance with you. This is the way you ride. I want you to be loose. I want you to be elbows relaxed. I want that bike to be underneath you, and you're working with it.
It felt like that was the bottom left, and the photo looked like the bottom
Look
right.
like that, which isn't bad. That's fine. If I go back to the photo of me on the Tiger, I mean, that's actually a fairly aggressive body position, but it doesn't look a whole lot because it's an upright bike. But my butt's a little bit off the seat, not a lot. Because you do the body position when it's appropriate. Sometimes I'll work with people on the racetrack, and they're young, and they're like hanging off like this, and they're working way too hard. So I bring them in and said, "Don't hang off so much." "Yeah, but Mark Marquez, MotoGP star, but he's got all this ground clearance left. So hang off as much as is appropriate. As he gets faster, he will have to hang off more." Okay, number 10, get training. Oftentimes, the people that come to my seminars aren't the people I need to reach. Your friends are, and you know who they are. The people who need to be here aren't here. So for me to tell you this, what I'm doing here is I'm telling you that there are options, there are opportunities. When we think about training, we oftentimes think about a parking lot course, MSF, boring, been there, done that. I know how to operate a motorcycle. But remember, like I said before, operating a motorcycle and riding a motorcycle are two different things. If you want to learn how to be proficient at riding any motorcycle, your motorcycle for sure, but I can get on any motorcycle and the principles all apply. Slight changes, very slight. That's where you want to be. And this is not, it costs money, sure, but it is one of the best investments you'll ever make. Save spending money on the chrome until after you've done the training. So here's reading. I talked about that. That's knowledge. Good. Doesn't make you a better rider though. I do street training. This is me with a student. We've been talking a lot about the track training. I also have an advanced parking lot course, which is very popular. I'm doing 3 of them this year. You learn a lot. You learn all the stuff we just talked about on a parking lot, and it allows you to kind of just keep it concentrated in one area. On the racetrack, people get a little more freaked out. They tend to get out there and go, "Oh my God, I don't want to crash my bike. I don't want to race," and stuff. It's like, well, that's not at all what this is, but everybody feels that way, and I understand why.
It's a lot of fun.
Once you get hooked, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to, riding on the racetrack it's kind of crack. I'm sorry, I'm a crack dealer when it comes to racetrack riding, because we've had a lot of people that started off coming with their Harleys, and then they are like, "Oh my gosh, I've never felt anything this invigorating before on a motorcycle. It's like the things I love to do." So they end up coming back a couple more times. I get a lot of repeat people for the non-sport bike days, and some of them go off. Let's see, Leo, are you here? Yeah.
I have not done the track.
You haven't done the track?
Just because I see it all the time. I've done your parking lot in the street.
Yeah, okay.
And I keep saying I'm going to do the track, and I keep not.
I thought for sure you did the track. I've seen enough of you, but I haven't seen you on the track. But there's one guy I know. He bought an SV 650 for $2,200, and that's his track bike. And now he comes, regularly. I only do 2 events a year, the non-sport bike days. We filled them up last year. They sold out. The May one now is more than half full. And I'm shocked, because usually we'd have to wait till April to get it filled. It's become so popular. It's because people are like, "Oh yeah, I like this." Yep. And they realize after you've done it one time that it's not as scary as you think. It will be first time there, absolutely. You'll be pretty anxious. But we take care of you. Classroom, go out and ride on the track, come back into the classroom, do a seminar during lunch, go back out on the track, come in the classroom. You ride your own ride. We have 3 groups. The three groups are sort of broken up. A lot of it now is going to be whether you've been on the track before, but also the type of bike you're on. If you're on an adventure bike, let's say you're on a Pan American, that bike will lean a whole lot further than one of the low-slung cruisers. So that would be a factor that would put you into the intermediate group if you've not been on the track. Maybe. But if you insist on being on the slower group, they're not really slow, medium, fast, but it's the bike allows the rider to go a little quicker. That's more the criteria. On a regular track day, it's about your experience level, purely. But we sort that out before you get out there. Street training, I sold out really early last year. I haven't released my dates yet, but I'm about to. So if you want to learn about that, send me an email. Just say you want to be on the mailing list, and ken@ridinginthezone.com. Okay, I talked already about this. There's another picture of non-sport bike day. You can ride anything. We had a guy on a Bergman scooter out there freaking flying. Parking lot course. So what we do here is we do work on all the things we just talked about, including body position. And slow speed maneuvers too. Street training. I also do this in Europe, by the way. I'll tell you about this. With Beach's motorcycle adventures, I've done this twice. I'm doing it a third time in May in Sardinia and Corsica. And so I'm along for the ride. So that's something if you've got some money burning in your pocket and want to go to Europe and ride.
I'll carry your bags for you.
So let's review. I'll let you read it. It's going to be the basis of questions that you have too.
Ken, a question?
Yes, sir.
Reverse camber. I mean, so I've been on some roads in California, mainly steep mountain roads, where it's got a steep camber, so when you're on a reverse, that makes it interesting for sure. Any thoughts on how to manage that better?
Absolutely. I just posted a video on managing camber on a road in California. I just posted it 3 days ago. So think about it. Now, to answer your own questions, this is sort of like I can give you water, or I can lead you to the well. What's the issue with camber? First off, everybody knows what camber is. It's a slope. So usually the road is crowned from the yellow line in the middle and for drainage, and it goes away that way. If it's engineered well, right-hand turns will be banked positively, which is part of the crowning, but left-hand turns will be having you going off camber. So now your tires are here, and the slope is going away from you.
So that's part of it, and then as you make a hairpin, sometimes you cross camber or
Yep.
you need to, right? And that makes it even more
Yeah.
interesting.
When it cross cambers, though, there's a point where you're actually perpendicular.
Right.
So if it goes like this, and as you go like that, and it goes like that, it's all good. See that? I'm not even leaning, essentially.
The peak, like sometimes you have to cross over the peak of the
Exactly. So you're going to go from positive camber to negative camber as you come up over a crown like that. So you're all good here, and then suddenly that front tire ain't feeling so good. Now think about the load. It's all about the load. When you're cornering, the forces are going this way. That's why you slide out, you low side if you hit sand. The angle is going to make it so that the load isn't pushing in perpendicularly anymore. It's a shear. It's oblique. So how do you do it? You see it coming. And as you do that, instead of, if you were on the brakes at that point, you get off the brakes. And you come up over it, and then you get yourself situated, and then you get on the brakes. So like that's one example. With the throttle, you can throttle out as you come up over, ease off the throttle, get back into the good camber, off you go. So it's all about timing, about understanding what the load is going to do. As it changes, your traction is going to change. You have to change what you're doing. It can also be body position too, but that's another level. Great question. Anybody else? So there's my YouTube channel. Let's look at some of these cornering tips. It's down here. This was cornering tips, so this is a general sort of overall thing. This is me riding and narrating. This was me riding behind a friend of mine, guy I went to Italy with. He was a student of mine in Italy, and I visited him in California, and I narrated to him what I was doing. And so that's what this video is. What's this? Oh, this is riding the Chief Joseph Highway, Beartooth Notch Highway, and I'm talking about trail braking. I'm talking about what I'm doing. So, and then there's more. I do reviews of bikes and things like that. Here we go. Virtual riders meeting for track day, first time track day people. Here's my website. This is the training website. If you want to read all the articles, you can go here. Just go to ridinginthezone.com. If you want the training, click on the training. It'll bring you here. If you want just the articles, it'll be more obvious on the Riding in the Zone homepage. Okay, I do have a couple books. That's what they cost if you like them. Again, if you order them at home, I have to charge you shipping. I really would love to just do cash if you have that. If you want Riding in the Zone, that can be it's $16 as a PDF off my website. You'll get it as soon as you pay for it. Any questions? Any other questions? So what did you learn? What was the one thing that you took away from today? Let's go kind of from this general direction over.
Well, I actually I was going to at one point ask about any kind of clutching, but you know,
It's a good question. In what situation?
but you didn't. In turns, when you're coming in too maybe too fast or whatever,
Okay.
and you're braking, but you also feel that maybe you wanted to get in the sweet spot.
Okay, remember what we talked about what is the motorcycle chassis like going through a corner? Anybody? Does it like to be off the throttle or on the throttle? On the throttle. Squeezing the clutch is the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Clutching is...
For slow turning.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you would use the clutch at speed. The only reason you use the clutch is to shift. When you're in a corner and you're in there too fast, a lot of people, it's a panic response, is to grab the clutch. But now you're freewheeling. And now you've really got trouble. The bike is not stable at all when it's freewheeling. So, but for slow speed...
Braking, at least I know I'm always braking if I hit the clutch. I'm in the process of braking.
Oh, if you have to downshift, that's the way to do it. But remember, clutching is not really it's at speed, it is to adjust your gear shift selection. Here's an example, though, where that doesn't apply, where the clutch can be very helpful. I'm going back to the hairpins in Europe. Tight uphill hairpin, I'm in first gear. I want to control that. I don't want it to start to lug. The big thing about uphill hairpins is stalling and falling. So I'll actually slip the clutch at that last little bit to make sure that I get the RPMs up. But it's such a slow turn that now it's turning into a parking lot turn. It's that tight, and it's uphill. Now I'm going to use the clutch for that. But let's bring it back to the slow speed maneuvering. When you make a tight U-turn, depends on the bike. Some bikes you can lug and actually make a tight turn. But more times than not, you're really relying on just the gearing that the manufacturer gave you. Put it in that sweet spot in the friction zone and keep the revs up a little bit. You're guaranteed not to stall.
This summer I went through Smuggler's Notch on a creamy ride of all things.
Yeah.
My son was leading it, and going up, from Jeffersonville down towards. It wasn't a problem. That hairpin turn was making me think.
Yeah.
But going back, when we had, then all of a sudden I said, okay, are we going to hit the interstate? And he said, no, we'll go back the same way we came. And that was the problem, going up on that hairpin turn.
Right.
And what I ran into was somebody coming down the car and decided to go before me, coming up through, and if I hadn't laid the bike over, I would have hit this guy. He came out and the nose of his car was sticking out quite a bit, and I just thought, there's no way I'm going to make this.
Yeah. So the issue about
when you drop a bike
on a fairly steep hill embankment,
Yeah.
there's a lot of panic
Sure.
to trying to get the bike back up.
You're human.
Cars are coming,
Yeah.
in both directions.
So I'm trying to visualize that whole scenario that you just mentioned. But the idea is that when you throw in cars, that's another thing you have to manage. These things, shit happens, right? So, and that is something you have to manage. When it comes to actually controlling the bike in a laboratory situation, that's a great way to understand how the bike works and how the tools, how they apply. When you asked about the clutch, that tight uphill thing, that's, be ready with your clutch. Any of you ridden out off-road riding? Yeah. So you know that oftentimes the clutch is how you actually manage it. You don't go down a gear, you just stay in second gear, and it's throttle and clutch, 2 fingers on the clutch. Like that's a way to keep the revs right where you want them to be, and so that you're not going to stall. Uphill hairpins, the danger is going too slow and falling over.
I wish I had just gone off to the side and stopped. Wait for this person to get through.
Yeah.
But
or gas it. I'm kidding.
Yeah, it was
sometimes that's not a bad choice.
Scenario.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And I got through it, and we got back down, and I went ahead of my son and the other guy that was with us.
Yeah.
Because they were helping me get it back up right, and then once we got it, kind of going.
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh, where the hell did you go?" And I just want to get down as fast as I could.
So you're a perfect example of somebody, if you knew these techniques, even in that situation, if you threw a car in that, you still fall back on your training, and you still might end up having it might end up resulting in a drop, but the chances are so much greater that it won't, because you will have had options that you didn't feel like you had right then.
That was the nightmare.
Yeah.
Got through it, going up and coming down, right?
Yeah.
It was a different story when my son said, "No, we're going back the same way we came." Okay.
No Christmas present for him this year. So let's do some random. Anybody else? One thing you learned today that you didn't know about?
Braking.
Trail?
I usually don't use my brakes that much at all.
Does it make sense what we talked about?
Yes.
Okay.
I just got off the throttle, go around the corner, but I hardly ever use my brakes.
Yep. So try to find those opportunities. Go in a higher gear, force yourself to use your brakes. Okay?
Mine's the back brake.
Both brakes in most situations. It's because on the street. It's both brakes. But remember that load is an issue. If you're going over something that's, let's say, a downhill gravel road, you'd want to favor your rear brake. Why would I want to favor my rear brake?
Well, if you hit your front brakes,
right.
Front just going to go one way or the other.
So it's common sense, right? It's not brain surgery. It's the fact is that if you lock the front wheel, you're going down. You lock the rear wheel, right? Favor the rear brake. Don't skid. You don't want to skid. To answer your question, though, it's generally both brakes, as a simple thing. I did mention a couple things where when I'm trail braking and I'm going into a corner, like particularly this hairpin situation, I'll come in and I'll get off the front brake, but I'll stay on the rear brake. And it helps me to refine that entry speed, and it helps the bike actually hook around. I have that going on in a bunch of my videos, so if you go there, you'll find that. Especially the one about which brake to use when. So that's one where you're using both, but you know when to transition. Parking lot maneuvers as rear brake only. The front brake's too powerful. You almost, even a 1% application of a front brake is too much, typically. Great. Anybody else?
I have 2 things. One, first of all, did with John years ago, the non-sport track days with you. Single biggest change in my riding was that opportunity. So everything that John said at the beginning and his presentation, so thank you for that.
Pleasure.
For my riding. The takeaway for me is like going from like on a street glide, for example, but electric motorcycles, live wire. I found myself I'm getting lazy. You put the live wire in sport mode, for example, when we're done braking. Yeah. I don't hardly use the brakes at all anymore. Yeah. And so I was really paying attention, kind of like back to the days of the ever so like 1%, 0.5%. I find myself really with technology now. It's making us, I think, to some bikes, it's going to become lazy. Yeah. So with electric bikes, they have a different, a different character to them.
In that case, I would turn down the regenerative braking at times, so that you can actually then use the brakes. It forces you to do it. Because you're right, if you're using a lot of regenerative braking, engine braking, that's what essentially is, then if you were to brake, you're going to slow down too much. So, yeah, every bike's going to be a little different. And a bike that I get on that has a lot of engine braking, my trick is to just, go up a gear, forces me to brake. But that's when I want to stay sharp. That's when I want to have fun. I want to use my brakes. It's fun. Brakes are fun. Anybody else? We can wrap this up. I think there's pizza. All good? Good. Go to the website. Look at the videos. So many answers there.